Welcome to How We Get Thru, the podcast where we share stories, mental health insights, and healing advice on life's everyday challenges. I'm your host, Jen, and today's guest is Morgan Carrion, an associate marriage and family therapist in California. In this episode, Morgan shares so many mental health myths about motherhood that will actually surprise you. She talks about how long the postpartum period really is and how our bodies adapt in the process. She also sets the stage for why recalling this experience is an important part of finding ourselves again. Join us as we dive deep into the complexities of motherhood and how it is so obvious why we feel lost in the process. So grab your favorite beverage, get comfortable, and let's get started. Hi, and welcome back. Today's guest is Morgan Carrion, and she's an associate marriage and family therapist in California. She helps people get through parenthood, partnership, identity crisis, and all the crazy stuff that life throws at us. Morgan creates beautiful spaces for groups of women to connect to themselves and others. Welcome, Morgan.
Thanks, Jen.
Yes, so excited to have you here. So we start off every episode with a mental health myth, and we would love to know yours.
Yeah, so when I think about this, one of my favorite ones to talk about is that postpartum lasts between 6 and 8 weeks. There's so many different ways to define this, obviously based on like what field you're in and how you're thinking about it. But I think that there is just a lot. Yeah, I'm going to share with you some cool factoids.
Facts. Yes, give it to us.
How this works. So yeah, I mean so the 6 to 8 week number comes from basically observations about how long it takes to heal from a non-surgical average birth experience, at least physically. And then, there's talk about this idea of like the 4th trimester, which is really cool. People trying to honor the 3 months after the baby is born. And, like doctors and therapists might say something like, it could be up to a year. But there was a really interesting study done pretty recently, and I think this is somewhat new information, but that a woman's brain changes more significantly during pregnancy and the postpartum period than it does in puberty. It's the most plastic it ever is in your whole life. And it changes in that it has significantly less gray matter. And this lasts for up to 2 years, which is so crazy.
What?
And it feels very true to my own felt experience and to the people that I have worked with and talked with. Where it's like around the 2-year mark, it feels like your brain is finally coming out of this fog. And so what it means to have significantly less gray matter is that basically like your mental resources are oriented away from things like memory and executive functioning, which is why people have all those like crazy, that's the mom brain thing. And they're all like your brain is basically reorganizing toward theory of mind. Like being able to intuit, it's the skill theory of mind, like losing my book on that. But you're basically it enables you to intuit people's needs on a more fundamental level and to respond to them. And so it's helping you prepare to take care of a nonverbal little person. But it changes for so much longer than we think. And then the other thing that I always think about is like on the identity side of things, like how long does it take to become a mother? It's more than 6 weeks and less than a lifetime. That's what we know.
That's beautiful. Wow.
So, I just think we have so much expectation and so much pressure around how long it should last. Oh, and then there's like the whole like how long we're expected to take at home before we go back to work, which is anywhere from 12 weeks to 6 months, I think is kind of the longest that I hear about people doing. And so, there's so much pressure to bounce back, to be your old self again, to be functional. And it takes a long time. It takes so much longer than anyone wants it to or thinks that it should.
Yeah. And I mean, you just like busted like 3,000 different myths, which is I think so telling of this subject of motherhood, right? Like it's so dimensional, it's so layered, it's so wonderfully and beautifully and hard and tough. Like there's so much polarity here. But I think what you're saying too is really busting open this idea that motherhood is a timestamp or a certain period, or the pressure that we put on ourselves to grow out of motherhood or grow through motherhood or be someone different or be a mom or be a worker. Like there's so many things that get just confusing for us as women. And when you talk about the actual brain and the physicality of it, where it's like we're not supposed to go to work
no
for at least 2 years, you know, like we're actually like shifting, and our humanity, our everything is online for this little human, for us to survive as this like these two people together. I mean, there's obviously the partner in that, or maybe there isn't, but that the mom is the one.
Yeah. And I think, oh man, I feel so many complicated emotions when you say that, because the mom is the one. It's something that our bodies are innately reorganizing around. And also it's such a privilege to get to stay, to be just the one, right?
Totally.
And two, that leads to such an imbalance of responsibilities in so many relationships. And, you know, I think so many people go into motherhood saying like, my partner is a feminist, we are woke, we are with it. And then are like, and it's going to be even, you know, I'm not going to be like a mommy, I'm going to be a partner. And it's,
Morgan's in LA, so that's very LA talk.
Right, that's very LA talking. Right. Sorry, that's true.
No, but it's good.
Location specific.
Yeah.
But people are just so gravely disappointed when it doesn't work out like that or feel like that. And I think this speaks to like how much conscious effort it requires for things to really feel balanced, if that fits with your value system or your family. People just don't think they're going to have to try as hard to divide responsibilities. But if that's what you want it to be, you're going to have to work really hard at it. And two, it's going to be impossible for it to ever be 50-50. And I think there's grief around that, you know?
Another myth, girl. Busted it open.
There's so many.
Oh my gosh.
Jen.
I know. There's so many. I mean, we should probably just do like a full-on season of the myths of
oh my God. And when you say myths, I think part of what you're saying too is like basic assumption that sort of helps us take
fall
the
into
plunge.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So fucking scary, right?
Yes.
You have to hope. I mean, I have so much compassion for all sides of the thing that you're like, okay, it's gonna be okay. It's gonna be this way. This is what I need it to be to do it. And then you do it, and it's like, wow, this is so much harder than I thought.
Yeah.
So
it's such an experience that you can't prepare for it.
Yes.
You can't know what the duties are going to be. You can't, it's such a new experience that you will never experience like something like that in your life again, that it just rocks you.
Yes.
So it is, I think that's why it's like, you know, we have to kind of have this like, you know, pie in the sky feeling of like, this is going to be wonderful.
Right.
We're not going to be like that. I'm not going to be like that. I'm not going to be that mom. You know, I'm not going to have all these toys in my living room. I'm like, look at all the freaking toys. What do you want? What do you need? How can I, you know, sleep? I mean, I'm buying all the things, right?
Yes.
But it helps us, I think, ease into that, but it can be also so jolting when you're like, this is not what I expect it to be. And at the same time, you can't even grasp what it is until you do it.
And I think that's because you don't know what it's going to feel like until you get there. You know a lot of what it's going to be, but you don't know what it's going to feel like. And
exactly.
Oh man, I talk about, okay, so yeah, one of my favorite like birth, new parenthood preparation ideas is this idea of cultivating an openness to the unbidden. And that comes from Britta Bushnell's birth preparation work. She has this really great book, Transformed by Birth, that even if you've already had children, I highly recommend reading. I feel like it's so beautiful how she describes the process, but that like one of the most important things for like a person going into this phase to possess is this preparation to be surprised, but it's an openness to what you didn't want, didn't expect, and couldn't plan for. And that hurts like hell.
Yeah.
It's
Yes.
so the antithesis of the way we live in our like present time, culture, all that stuff. So I think that's also why it's so challenging, is it's like this very new experience. That's part of what makes it a new experience, that it's like counter to the way we live our lives in every other way.
Yes, exactly. And I'm so curious for you in being a therapist and being a mom, like what was your journey into therapy and into motherhood, and how were they intertwined? Because you were such a powerhouse, and I've heard from so many people that have taken your course that are like, it's exactly what I needed. I just remember reading your scripts and I'm like, oh my God, this is like insane. Like you're just truly gifted in the way that you talk about it, name things, hold space for things. And so, I'm just like here to celebrate you, but also I would love to know your experience in how those have kind of collided. What came first?
Okay, so starting with therapy, honestly, being a therapist is the one thing I always told everyone in my life I would never do. And namely, it was because there were people who wanted me to do it. And I was like, no, I'm going to find my own way. But I came around eventually. And part of that was because I really have had this like lifelong obsession with trying to understand how people work, what motivates them, why they are the way they are. And that's really specific to that was formulated in my family context, I think, because there was a lot of confusing things about it. And so I became really preoccupied with like basically explaining people's behavior to myself as like a way of self-soothing and orienting. And so I think it's a skill I developed from like coping, early. And so yeah, and I think that's often how I related to people and connected with them, was by like trying to understand where they were coming from, and I got really good at it. I studied art, I have a BFA, and really, really loved doing that. Graduated, decided that I was kind of interested in teaching or maybe museum ed stuff, because I loved this experience of facilitating experiences for people in front of works of art. I like loved being this intermediary. Critiques were like my favorite thing. Asking questions, helping people see things differently, noticing together, picking things apart together. I was a docent at the Getty for a while for school groups. And man, that was like one of the most soul-filling things I had done to that point, just because people can walk in cold and you can help them have an experience with something that surprises them that they didn't know that they could have, just through observation and helping them notice. And so I kind of worked in the nonprofit world for a while, like 6 years, loosely holding that. But to me, the biggest problem was like how to make an actual living in those worlds.
Yeah.
And I decided I didn't want to work 5 jobs and be driving all around Los Angeles, like trying to teach, trying to do half volunteer, half, paid work. And so I came back around to therapy at first because it was kind of a practical choice, to be honest, where I thought like, what's something I can do that I might be good at, that I could make a living doing. And then I just sort of realized that so many of the things that I imagined you were doing as a therapist aligned with the most invigorating parts of the art stuff that I love. And like the making part for me, I decided I was very good with it just being a hobby. I wanted to just do it for myself. And so that's how I've like balanced those things for myself moving forward. And since motherhood, it's been very hard to upkeep my hobbies. So that's also something,
Preach.
Another line of thought, but where they've all been redirected around the child.
Yes.
So I decided to go back to school while I was working at a nonprofit in Pasadena, an educational nonprofit at the time. And so I worked full time and went to school in the evenings.
Wow.
It was a lot. And I basically decided that I was going to have a baby before my last year in school, partly for practical we were just in a place where it was like, felt like time in our relationship. And I knew that I was going to have to quit my job to start my practicum. And it kind of felt like the last time I was going to have like this bridge of security. And, maternity leave is a really valuable thing.
Yeah.
Part of me, some people feel maybe like a little bit ashamed using jobs for maternity leave, but I like to talk about it openly, that it's okay to try to
Yes.
to receive support during this like very unsupported time.
Yeah.
There's so much like financial and practical impossibility to choosing to have kids, or it feels that way. So hard to figure out. And so I think, one thing I try to normalize that it's okay. You have needs. You need to pay
Yes.
and you want to have a baby. And it feels like this alien thing you're supposed to figure out how to do.
Yeah.
So anyways, I got the maternity leave. I planned to go back to work after for at least a period. I had a really smooth pregnancy, a really positive birth experience. That's what I had really oriented myself around preparing for. And it went so well. And I just, it was like 12 hours, was unmedicated, had her in the bath. And afterward, I was just like high on life, because it was shocking that it went that way. No other person I had known who tried to do a first birth out of hospital had done it, or not had done it, but like had needed medical help. Right. And so it was a shock. But the second she came out, I will never forget the sound of her scream. And it felt like she never stopped crying from that moment, So she was really difficult to soothe. Really, really, really struggled with sleep. You know how a lot of newborns are like, you can just hold them and they just fall asleep.
Mm-hmm.
Some newborns do this.
Yes.
I remember seeing newborns like that and just being like, I cannot imagine having that experience. So I basically spent the next 18 months trying to get this baby to sleep. Like it was what my life revolved around. Especially in the beginning, I became like pretty obsessive with the information around it. I was just constantly on my phone, researching the shit out of it. Like, because I had also gone into parenthood thinking like, this is scary, this is going to be hard, but there are professionals, there are tools, there are people that can help you. There are lactation consultants, there are sleep trainers. We can do this. And then I had a baby where a lot of stuff just didn't work. She never took a bottle. She wouldn't take a pacifier. She only wanted me. Breastfeeding went great. She was very healthy. She was like as fat as can be. So there were so many things that I had seen other people lose a lot of sleep over and be very stressed out about that I knew I was very grateful and lucky to have be smooth. But the sleep thing was just unbelievably hard to get over, and the obsession that I sort of acquired from it. And then she really, really struggled still with sleep. She's 3 now. But for the first 18 months, I didn't get more than 4 hours of sleep ever in a row. And there were like, in the middle of the night, she would be up for like 5-6 hours. And so I just really lost my mind. I really, really started to lose it. Feeling angry, feeling really disoriented, unable to think. I kind of had to finish school during this period. And so I think the level of disorientation I experienced around that made me interested in like this population and this demographic. And just like I was seeking survival for myself, So I wasn't working with clients yet, or in the beginning. I started to like later that year, but still from a very non-functional place. So it was this crazy experience too of just like not feeling fully well yourself and then like trying to give to other people, which I learned a lot from. Yeah. So that was sort of like how the motherhood thing came into it. And also I will say, Jed, that I've always been super fascinated with birth, with like all things womanhood and with female bodies, like our how much more there is to know and understand on like a culturally wide level about this stuff. So I've always wanted to be part of that facilitation process of like helping us know ourselves better. And then I went through an experience that felt so untouchable by anybody else. And that was the crazy thing about it. I think like say, it's true. Communal support and feeling supported is directly correlated with lower levels of PPD, so postpartum depression and postpartum anxiety. And it was this wild experience of like, no one can help me. No one can take this away from me. This is my I have to take care of. Someone can help me nap for 2-3 hours here and there, but she's mine and I'm alone in this. And I think there's some circumstantial things that maybe could have been helped with that, but it's also an existential reality that's, I think, pretty hard to face and just true. And I think people face that in birth sometimes in the postpartum period, but it's this deep loneliness that like you just have yourself. You have to just meet yourself there.
Yeah. But that can feel like inescapable. And that's the hard part. It just starts, I remember like the nighttime, it's the, what's it called? Oh my God, the waking hour,
wake window. What? Wait, is that?
No. Oh my gosh.
Witching.
No, when it gets witching hour. Thank you. It's been a long time. But my body remembers it.
Yes.
But just like all of a sudden getting really anxious and like sad and stuck again of like, we're going into another night where who knows what the fuck's going to happen.
Yeah.
I did not have the same experience of you. There's obviously other different things, but when moms talk about not sleeping, I always bring up like war torture strategies that they do where they keep you up and they keep you, because our brains need sleep. It makes your body like, it like recoups your body in so many different ways in your brain. And I mean, it's such a basic need and a very big need, especially for mothers. And it's the one thing that you cannot guarantee. And you cannot function. And so you hear about like, a lot of psychosis and you hear about a lot of like really tragic things. And it's like, we're not looking at this part of motherhood where it feels so lonely. It feels so isolating. And if you're the only one, what options do you have? Right. And if you're the only one that's not getting sleep, what options do you have? And what I'm hearing you say is like, there wasn't any, like, it just didn't feel like that. But you also met yourself there.
Yes. And I think looking back on it now, I do realize that I was resistant to like how my baby was. And I think that created conflict and led to more anxiety. I couldn't stop trying to fix the problem.
Yeah.
And I don't know, Jen, if this would have made it better. But part of me tells myself like, okay, what if you had just sort of accepted that this is how it was? And I think I see mothers appearing a little bit more resilient when they can just sort of like soften themselves, be open to that unbidden, soften into the circumstances that they have with their baby. And
like they're not a bad mom.
Yeah. Oh, I felt like such a failure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so awful about how my level of functioning out there in the world. And yeah, I just felt like I wasn't able to give her what she needed. So that was the other mindfuck, was that like I wasn't getting what I was needed and she needed sleep. And there was so much anxiety there. Yeah. And I just wanted to help her and I couldn't.
Yeah.
And yeah, that I wasn't a bad mom. Oh, man.
Yes, loaded.
Yeah.
Loaded. But it starts from infancy, right? Because again, this is how your baby should do it. Here are the wake windows. This is how you should sleep. This is when you should feed them. That breastfeeding should be easy. Or, even if we know that, we're like, oh, well, I don't know what it's going to be like for me. I can be open. But as soon as something doesn't work innately the way that we thought it was supposed to, it does come with that, like, what is wrong with me? Why can't I? Why can't they? I'm the one that should know, right? Again, coming back to that sole responsibility as a mother. And I think there's a lot of power and empowering that we can do around that. But in those situations, it feels so shamey.
Yeah, it really does. It's so helpless.
Yes. And so
yeah, I think when you're that helpless and feel that solely responsible, there's no one to blame but yourself, right? You can't.
Right.
And you do feel angry at the baby sometimes.
Yes.
It's also that anger bounces back and forth somewhat. But ultimately, that they're not responsible, that you're the adult, you're the responsible one. And so it feels like, what is there left to do but to blame? But I mean, so much of it comes down to being able to tolerate something difficult and something unfixable, which again is something that I'm not used to in that way, right? So
yes, exactly. And I think that's why, like, when we first met, so Morgan was our second in-person recording ever. And she did amazing. And when we were talking about the script, we were trying to land on a title. We were trying to land on like, okay, something in motherhood, right? And we landed on finding yourself in motherhood. And yeah, I think you came up with that. Like I was like trying to workshop and you're like, boom. And I was like, that's so good. It's so good because that it's almost like this invitation inward into the lifelong process of motherhood. It's like you catch them, I think, in the course in a really specific time, but it's almost building that foundation for this continuum of motherhood and allowing yourself to continue to grow. But I just want to know your heart, your thoughts in creating this course and how it felt for you and your kind of like mission in this one slice of finding yourself in motherhood.
Yeah. So kind of like what we were just talking about, in how disorienting this experience can be for your self-perception. I used to listen to birth stories, didn't very much after, kind of couldn't, but someone sent me one when I was in the postpartum period, that was with a therapist, and she had a difficult to soothe baby. And she described how her response to that experience, she perceived it as like developmentally appropriate to feel anxious, to feel upset, to feel lost. And I just remember weeping and feeling like no one had normalized for me what was happening inside of me. No one had told me that like it makes sense that you feel this way about yourself, that this disorientation is adaptive even to something that's really hard. And so I feel like once I was had a little bit more mental clarity, I went back in looking for some of those answers and descriptions, and realized that there really is like research and a lot of information to support that like anxiety and even resistance to motherhood is adaptive. It's normal. It actually helps you cross the threshold into taking on the identity. And so when it comes to finding yourself again, I think so many people feel like when they feel lost, when they feel unmoored, when they feel disoriented, that they're doing something wrong, that other people around them have something figured out that they don't. And I think I wanted to tell them with this course that that's not true, that what they're going through is appropriate for the change that they're undergoing, and that the lostness, the feeling of lostness isn't a sign that you are lost. It's just
or gone
on the path.
Yes. And I think that was a really good point of like putting that word again in the title, because it's almost like this, I don't know, I feel like you're like kind of like dying to be reborn in some ways. It's like, this is a new version of you, but these things that were in the past aren't lost. They're just not here right now. Like, because they can't be. Like, there's just not enough room for that yet. And I think I'm a 5-year-old. I'm a 3-year-old and 5-year-old. I'm not that much farther ahead. But I think for me in this, it's like it gets to shift back towards me and back towards who I am. And what even when you talk about art and the creativity, or like the spark back, or the embodiment back of being feminine, of being a mother. And I think, again, it just keep evolving, but you kind of have to know where you are first. You have to land somewhere, even if it's like, I don't know who the fuck I am anymore. Right. And that's okay.
Right. Yes, I so agree with that. And I think, to your point, people feel so often like the mother has just eclipsed the old them, right?
Ooh, good. That's
and I feel like one of my favorite things to do in therapy, Jen, is to like lean into a mom and just say to them, like, you are still in there. Like, Jen hasn't gone anywhere. She was here before and she'll be here after. These babies are grown. And so it's just about you reconnecting with her, you letting her be present with you in this experience, you integrating her in. And it takes time, but nothing is lost. This baby needs to take any,
Yeah.
Sorry, a lot is lost, but in the general experience, but not in the sense of who you are as a person.
Yes. I like pointing towards my like body, like these senses of like soul pieces, essentially, right? Like that doesn't go away with any other role that you like tackle on, but things do have to shift in time, you know, as you go through life. Like it's almost, even if you didn't have kids, it's like, what other roles are you taking and how are you finding yourself, or how are you feeling lost? Even before kids, in your 20s, you're like, I'm lost. What's happening? It's a similar thing. I think motherhood just is such a slap in the face.
Such a slap in the face. And we'll get into this like later on in the conversation. I think you said we were going to talk about tips and stuff. But
yes.
It's such a slap in the face. And I think what it happens is like you're just so encroached on by these little people who are infinite vortexes of need. And you don't know how to take up space anymore. Because again, you've been reorganized around caring for them. And that's a good thing.
Yeah.
And you sort of have to learn how to become solid again in the room, you know, take up mass, take up space.
Yeah.
Let yourself get bigger next to these other big, beautiful, important, needy people.
Yes. Yeah. And then like, you know, there's like societal shifts around how can we nurture the mother as the mother is learning to nurture someone else because she can't nurture herself right now, you know? And I mean, that's a whole another whole season. But I think it's like this invitation again, like there's nothing wrong with you if it's hard to nurture yourself because you're so focused on something else or someone else that how do we really support you in doing that? So, so good. Yeah. Morgan, I just love always having conversation with you. I love talking about the subject. Again, I think you really establish beautiful themes. And just again in your course, like really is like such a great place for people to land and to feel normal into this craziness of motherhood. I would take this course as like any stage of motherhood that you're at, because I think it's just a good reminder that we can come back to these pieces and it's okay that they had to go away for a while or they were eclipsed. I love that. It was so beautiful. Thank you so much for being on here. If you guys want to stay tuned for part 2, Morgan and I are going to go deep dive into how we get through this little thing called motherhood. Thank you so much, Morgan, for being here.
Thanks, Jen.
Thanks for listening to our show. We hope this conversation invites you to think about your own motherhood journey with a little or a lot more compassion. Make sure to catch next week's episode as Morgan and I explore how we can connect back to ourselves within motherhood. And if you want a more personalized experience, check out Morgan's course, Finding Yourself Again in Motherhood, on the How We Get Thru app, which is available for both Android and iPhone. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.